Hey folks, I'm Mr. Hartzler and I want to talk to you about factored form of a quadratic function. It's what's up on your screen, so let's get started. So I start off here with a little bit of target and your vocabulary. So there's just the one thing we hope to be able to do. I can find zeros of a quadratic function. That's the only purpose of this thing. And zero product property, we'll get to that as we go, but for the most part it means if two things are multiplied together to get me and the result is zero, then one of those things is zero or both of those things is zero. So we'll see as we go. All right, folks, here's our first one, factoring a quadratic expression, and that's it right there up on the board. So let's give this a shot. We're going to factor this. So what things multiply to get me this 12, and what numbers add to get me this 7? Well, let's start with the things that multiply to get me 12, and that's going to be 1 and 12, or 2 and 6, or 3 and 4, and that's kind of it. And then, of course, the reverse of all of these things. Then what adds to get me the 7? Well, that doesn't, that doesn't, that does. So I'm going to have an x plus a 3, and then an x minus a 4. Those things are going to multiply to get me my final answer there, which is going to be this up here. I can always check this, right? I can distribute. I'm just going to write dist. And I can FOIL this back out, right? First, outer, inner, last. So my first thing in each set of parentheses multiplied together gets me an x squared. And then my outer things for FOIL, that's what we typically refer to it as. Now my outer things, the x and the negative 4, gets me a, positive 4. Gets me a positive 4x. Then my inner things, these two things are inner, gets me 3x, and then my last thing in each set of parentheses gets me 4 times 3 is 12. Combine your middle terms, your like terms here, and we end up back at our original. So this right here is our factored stuff. Let's go on to the next one. So on this one, you'll notice no middle term, which can be a little bit intimidating, but don't worry about it, right? It's just 0 x's hanging out there. Don't worry about it. I still need to multiply to get me this negative 16, but I need to add to get me 0 x's. So what two things multiply to get me a negative 16? Well, but remember, it has to add up to, or multiply to be a negative 16, so one of those has to be positive, one of those has to be negative. That adds up to 0. So let's break it up here. X plus 4 and x minus 4. Nice. That works, right? Let's check it. Let's FOIL it.
My first term is going to give me x squared. My outer terms give me a negative 4x. Inner terms give me a positive 4x. And the last terms give me a negative 16.
Middle terms cancel. Sweet. We did it right. Let's go on to our next one. All right, now this one, folks, can be a little bit more intimidating. I have a value out in front of x squared, so I'm going to have to do some stuff with that. I'm going to rewrite this down here. All right, now I need to take my first term and multiply it to my last term. That gets me 6. That's the new number that I want to multiply to get to, and I still want to add up to get myself a negative 7. So things multiply to give me a 6, add to give me a negative 7. That's 1, 6, 2, and 3. Definitely not 2 and 3, but 1 and 6. That'll get me there. That'll get me a 7, but not a negative 7. But double negatives, folks. Negative 1 times negative 6 will still get me a positive 6 when they multiply, but they add to get me that negative 7. Sweet. So I'm going to rewrite this, and it's going to look funny for a second, and I'm going to explain what it's all about. So I have this. Notice my two middle terms still add up to get me that negative 7. So I'm okay. I haven't changed anything here. But now I have 4 terms, and I'm going to do what's called factor by grouping. So I'm going to group my first two things and my last two things and factor out whatever I can. So my first two things have a 3x, and I'm left with an x and a minus 2. And then my last two things, I'm actually going to factor out a negative sign because that's what's hanging out in front of my x. So a negative 1, and I'm left with a positive x now and a negative 2. Now that was important because now you'll notice these two things are the same. I want to pull that all the way out in front. So I have an x minus 2 all the way out in front. I'm left with 3x from the first term and a negative 1 for my second term. That is this all factored out. It's beautiful, folks. Right there, done. So I did some fancy multiplying with my first and my last term, and that told me what I need to multiply to get to. I still need to add to get my middle term, but then I just split this one up. Then I factored it by grouping. So I grouped up my first two and my last two. And this works even if I switched my x and my negative 6x. If I switch those two things, it still works. You just look exactly the same, actually. So there's that. Let's go on to the next one, folks. All right, folks, so now we're going to work on this one, zero product property, and we're going to use that to help us solve this. So I have a couple of things equal 42. So many of you are going to be like, well, I can just factor that left side out then, right? That's kind of what you're getting at. And set that equal to 42. But then you're saying that these two things multiplied to 42, I mean, they could be all kinds of different stuff. There's a whole bunch of different solutions. That doesn't work. That doesn't help us at all. What I do need to do is the zero product property, which says if A times B equals 0, then A equals 0, or B equals 0, or both equal 0. One of those two things must be true in order for it to equal 0. So let's get this equal to 0. Let's subtract this 42 over. Subtract this 42 over. X squared plus x minus 42 equals 0. Okay. And then what things multiply to get me a negative 42? Add to get me a positive 1. So that's going to be a negative 7 and a positive 6. No. Ooh, because that would give me a negative 1. I need to switch this. So that's going to be a positive 7. And this is going to be a negative 6. So x plus 7, x minus 6 equal 0. Well, now I know that one of these things must be 0, right? So either this one equals 0 or that one equals 0. So let's split it up into two cases. X plus 7 equals 0 or x minus 6 equals 0. Let's solve each one. So this one is, well, subtract the 7 over negative 7. And this one, add the negative 6 over, and I get x equals 6. So my answer is x equals, I write small numbers first. Oh, not a 6. Come here, little fella. There we go. Negative 7 or positive 6. But now I need to double check, so I'm going to plug that in. I'm going to plug in the negative 7 first. So negative 7 squared plus negative 7 equals 42. Let's see if that's true. So I'm going to put a question mark. 49 minus 7 equals 42. Cool, that one checks out. Let's check the other one. Positive 6 squared plus 6. Does that equal, question mark, 42? 36 plus 6 does in fact equal 42. Sweet, they both work. They might not always work, so make sure you check. Let's go on to the next one, folks. All right, so here, this one's really not an example. It's more just words for you, but your zeros are also x-intercepts, and they're also called your solutions and sometimes called roots. But another way of saying it, zeros, same thing as your x-intercepts, same thing as your solutions, same thing as your roots. So, which means I could ask you to find your zeros of a function, or find the x-intercepts of a function. Oh, lights turned off. Or find the solutions, or find the roots. I could ask for any of those things. It all means the same. You're going to find out what x is, folks, and that's it. Set the thing equal to 0 and solve for x. All right, let's keep going. Now this one can be a little bit tricky. This is all about a graph. So we're going to have to look at this equation and do some things. Step 1, find your zeros. We've done this a couple of times now. I'm going to set y equal to 0 because, remember, this is all about x-intercepts as well. So I'm just going to say that instead of y, this equals 0. And we'll see if we can factor it. So let's see here. Multiply to get me a negative 3. Add to get me a negative 2. Well, that's going to be a negative 3 times a positive 1. That checks out. Okay, so 0 equals x minus 3, x plus 1. Set each piece equal to 0. So I get an x minus 3 equals 0. So x equals 3. And then x plus 1 equals 0. So x equals negative 1. Those are my two things. But then you'll notice, right, I'm going to put this on a number line because I think that is sometimes helpful. A negative 1 and then a positive 3. Those are the two things. But determine where stuff's positive and negative. So my graph, right? Am I like this? Or am I like this? Oh, I missed that 3 by a lot. But you see what I mean here? Which one of these is it? I need to figure that out. So I'm going to plug some numbers in. I actually already did a little bit of it for you. Let me change colors. All right. So I found my zeros. Cool. Check mark that you can't see it because I wrote it in black now. Choose an interval or choose a number in the interval. So what's to the left of this interval? Let me actually use red so I can see it everywhere I write it. So here's my red. What's a number to the left of that? Well, I chose -3. See that over on the left? And then I plugged that -3 in, and I simplified, and I got a 12, which is a positive number. Hopefully, we can all agree on that. So that's a positive number. That means that on my number line over here at -1, so over here at -3, I'm above my graph. I'm at a 12. Doesn't matter how high it is right now. It just matters that it's above the line, because I know I come through and I touch right here at -1. That's a guarantee, because that came from this coordinate point here, this factor right here. Right there. It means I had to have crossed at -1. But now what's happening between -1 and 3? Am I below this line or am I above it? I need to figure something out. So what's the number in that interval over on my table? Well, I'm going to choose x equals 0. That's an easy number to plug in. So 0 squared minus 2 times 0 minus 3. Well, that simplifies pretty easy, folks. That's a -3, and that is a negative number. That means I must be below my graph until I intersect here again at my solution or my root or my 0 that I found at 3 from this coordinate point. But now what happens? Do I go up or do I go down? Well, let's see. That's a number that's bigger than 3 over there. And so x greater than 3, well, let's pick 100. I know you're all like, well, it's too hard to plug in. I don't give you calculators, because I don't give my students calculators. It's fine. So let's see this. 100 squared minus 2 times 100 minus 3. We agree that 100 squared is a really big number, and that -200 is not that big. So this number ends up being a negative number. Or sorry, a positive number, because 100 squared is really big, and then everything else I'm subtracting like pennies compared to it, right? So this is going to be positive. I like to pick dramatic cases because I think it makes things more obvious, right? Like that's way bigger, 100 squared, so that's another 0, 0. So that's 10,000 minus 203. I'm definitely positive. So there's that. All right, folks. That's it. That's all I got. So I hope you have a great day. And if you liked this background format, I don't know. I'm trying something new. It's like a whiteboard now. We'll see what happens. Or chalkboard, not whiteboard. It was like a whiteboard before. But if you like this, hit that like button down below. And please don't let the time on this video make anybody afraid. I guess I'm at the end. So if you made it this far, you probably aren't afraid about the time being long anyway. So have a great day, folks. Don't do drugs.